Hi, this is Ray from Honey Top Bees, and today let's talk about some really bad ways to control Varroa inside of your hives. My name is Ray. I'm a beekeeper here in South Carolina. I am part of the University of Florida Master Beekeeper program. I teach beekeeping classes and enjoy helping people with their beekeeping journey. Today I want to talk about some things that either I've had other people tell me that they're not doing or doing poorly when it comes to taking care of their Varroa mite loads inside of their hives, or full confession, some of the things that I have done and led to my failure in my early years as a beekeeper. So let's talk about really bad ways to manage Varroa inside of our hives. By now you should know about the Varroa destructor. It's a mite that attaches to the bee, can spread viruses and weaken the bee's immune system, and can really wreak havoc on your hives. This video is being recorded in the month of September, and it's at this time of year in my area of the country, the Southeast, that Varroa levels are at their highest. The Varroa has been snowballing all year. One mite gets inside of the hive, it reproduces 5, those 5 reproduce 25, and those 25 reproduce 125, and those 125 reproduce and they make 500, and it's snowballing throughout the season. And so Varroa mites are at their highest level. Now, the purpose of this video is not to tell you about what the Varroa destructor can do inside of your hive, but let's just talk about how we as beekeepers should not be managing our Varroa inside of our hives. Bad practice number 1 is just relying on the visible. You have all probably seen pictures like this where you see the Varroa mite on the back of the bee. And some beekeepers will tell me, well, I don't see any Varroa mite on the back of my bee like I see in the pictures on Google, and so I don't have a Varroa mite problem. Here's the problem with that. The Varroa attach themselves to the bee's body on the underside of the abdomen. If they are on the top, it very well may be because all of the primary feeding places where the Varroa prefers to feed as a parasite on the bee are already taken up. All the booths are full at the restaurant, and so they're going and they're sitting outside or sitting up on top of the bee. So if you do see Varroa on your bee, then you probably have a bigger problem. I had somebody tell me just recently, I said, have you been testing for Varroa? And they said, well, no, but I just never see any. And I'm not talking about, not seeing them on your bottom board or whatever. I'm talking about primarily seeing them on your bees. Don't rely on the visual to determine whether or not you have Varroa inside of your hives. Because when you look at your hive, like this particular hive one of my hives, a picture, you look at all those bees and they're all moving around, and if you just look around and say, oh, I don't see any Varroa, I must be okay, that's really not the case, because when you do an oxalic acid treatment, vaporization treatment, and pull out your bottom board on this, all of these yellow dots on here are all the Varroa mite that were inside of that hive. And so there were a lot of mites on here, but did I see them? No. So let's move on to bad practice number 2, and that is to neglect testing. One of the mistakes I made as a beekeeper was I just hoped that I didn't have Varroa. Honestly, I'm just being full. Like my first year keeping bees, so just a little back history. I kept bees with my father growing up in Vermont, but this was before the Varroa destructor had come into America. So we never dealt with Varroa mites. And so when I started keeping bees, my attitude toward the Varroa my first year was, well, I never had them as a kid, and I'm just going to hope that I don't have them now. And that was kind of my strategy. And so I did this. I neglected testing. Still today, the most reliable test is the alcohol wash. And some beekeepers just are really reluctant to test their bees because they don't want to have to kill bees using the alcohol wash. So a couple tips for you on that. Number 1, there are other ways that you can test your bees, including the sugar shake method that doesn't kill your bees. It's not as accurate as the alcohol wash, but what I recommend if you don't like killing your bees, and none of us do, is doing a sugar shake wash 1 month, doing an alcohol wash every other month, and just kind of writing down those numbers, and that will kind of give you a barometer to know where your mite level is. But we cannot neglect to test our hives. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to the Varroa. And I did that for a while. And in doing that, I lost my hives winter after winter because I did not pay attention to testing and knowing what my mite levels are. And so when you are testing your bees, you're taking a small sample of 300 bees. But if your queen is laying 1,500 or 2,000 eggs a day, then it's just a couple of hours of work for her to replace all of those bees. And I've said this in my other videos, and I'll just mention it again here because I think it's helpful illustration. If I had a little spot of skin cancer on my hand and I went to the dermatologist, it's worth it to get that little piece of skin cancer cut off and sent to the lab and tested to know whether I have a bigger problem inside of my body with melanoma. And that's kind of the way I see testing of bees. Like, I hate to kill the bees in alcohol wash too, but those 300 bees can actually save the entire colony. And then if I don't test and if I don't know how pervasive the Varroa load might be inside of my beehive, then my whole colony is subject to collapse, and I could lose them over the course of the winter. So don't neglect testing. Know what your mite levels are. So many times students come to me and they say, I don't know what's wrong with my hive. And the first question I ask them is, what is your mite level? And a lot of times they don't know because of this problem right here. They neglect testing. There's a lot of great videos. I have a couple of videos I'll put in the description of how to test using an alcohol wash. Just watch them and gain some confidence, and you can do it. Hi, this is Ray. When you hit like, subscribe, or leave a comment, it really helps me to build my channel. So thank you so much. Number 3 is the incorrect use of treatments. So follow the label when it comes to treating, no matter what treatment you choose for your Varroa. It's very, very important. Don't take a cavalier attitude that says, well, I'm just going to put a little bit inside of my hive because I don't think I have that big of a problem. Or I'm going to put an extra dose in there and really just knock them out. The right treatment level is very, very important, especially with a lot of the chemical, either the natural chemical or the synthetic chemical treatments that are available on the market today. Use the correct amount. Using too much may not really have an effect on the Varroa load inside of your hive as much as it might affect the health of the bees. You can burn up your brood. There's stories that you'll see, you'll find them all over YouTube, of queens that have died or abandoned the hive because too strong of a chemical treatment was used for that size of a colony. So balancing the size of your colony and following the label correctly on the for the treatment is essential to treating your beehive correctly and managing your Varroa load. One last thing I want to mention here about incorrect use of treatment. Some of you are DIYers and you found a concoction somewhere of essential oils and different things that you want to use to treat Varroa. And I'm all for that. I think, if you're good at that and you're paying attention to it, you can maybe have some success. But for most people, I really recommend, especially new beekeepers, I really recommend use the products that are available commercially. Even if you want to use an essential oil product, there are essential oil mite treatments that are available commercially. And here's why. Those have gone through some scientific testing to determine the proper dosage and the proper strength that is needed to treat mites inside of a hive without damaging the hive or without having any effect on the Varroa. And so if you're just getting started, you're under 5 years of beekeeping, I would encourage you just use the commercially available treatments. If you want to get into DIY and you want to do it later on, that's good. Just be careful of anecdotal stories that people might have about how this mite treatment really worked great for them, and so I know it'll work great for you. It very well may, but just be careful. I really encourage you to just stay with the commercial ones until you have a little bit of experience of managing Varroa inside of your hive. And then lastly, best practice, biggest failures for treating Varroa mite would be ignoring IPM, Integrated Pest Management. And by this, I'm talking about just throwing some chemicals in there. Sometimes beekeepers tell me that they just put some chemicals in, they didn't test their level, and they just hope that that's going to take care of it. But there's a lot of things that you need to do in regard to IPM, and that would be rotating different chemicals inside of your hive, making sure that you also use mechanical or cultural controls for controlling Varroa inside of your hive. So we're talking about things like the green drone comb. We're talking about things like a brood break for the queen. A screen bottom board can help reduce your mite load by as much as 15%, because when the bees knock the mites off, they can't crawl back on or crawl back into a cell to reproduce. So we're talking about just using some mechanical controls and some cultural controls. Some of these might be buying VHS queens that are being bred to be more effective in the fight against Varroa, for example. Don't ignore the various ways that we can attack the Varroa inside of our hives, and not just throw chemicals at them. Because even though I use chemicals in my hives, I'm not a huge chemical person. I like to use as little as possible. And by using other methods, I can knock my mite loads down and reduce the amount of chemicals that I need. Now, if you're a treatment-free beekeeper, go for it. It's all for you. I hope it works well for you. I'm not going to be critical of somebody that wants to go for that. And there are some beekeepers that are out there who is just survival of the fittest, and they're going to let the bees try to figure it out. And I get that as well. And there's probably a place for you to experiment with that. Some people have tried that and they continually lose their bees year after year. If you're not, then keep doing it and keep up the good work. But for most beekeepers, I find that you have to practice some good practices when it comes to treating Varroa. So I just want to encourage you, let's wipe these 4 bad practices out and do a better job of managing Varroa inside of our hives. Till next time, this is Ray at Honeytop Bees. God bless.
This is a test of Varroa mite management.